Welcome to The Lowdown, the podcast where we talk about Bigfoot and other cryptids, paranormal encounters, UFOs, true crime, weird history, and everything in between. I'm your host, Jared Lowe, and if you've got an encounter that you'd like to share or if you'd like to be on the show, you can email me at thelowdownpodcast411@gmail.com. Follow me on Instagram at TheLOWedownPodcast, and subscribe on YouTube at TheLOWEdownFL. Now, we've got a great show for you today, so kick back, relax, and let's get into it. I hear this thing crashing through the trees, and it got closer and closer and closer, and then all of a sudden everything just went quiet. Like I was being watched.
Imagine you're in the heart of a vast, dark, ancient wilderness. The kind of place where the trees are so thick that they just blot out the stars. The air is cool and thick with the sound of pine and damp earth. You've been walking for hours, miles and miles from the nearest road, driven by this unexplainable urge to just be alone. But as the shadows lengthen and the forest settles into the silence of the night, you realize you're not alone. You hear the sound of a large branch snap off in the distance. It's too large to be a deer. The subtle, heavy scent of musk on the air. Then you feel it. Not a sound, but a vibration. A vibration in the ground, and a feeling intense and unmistakable that you're being watched. Watched by something massive, something primal, something that doesn't just inhabit the forest, but is of the forest in a way that we have long forgotten. And this isn't just a shadow in the woods. This is a legend made flesh, a specter of the deep wild. Before we knew this continent as North America, the first peoples who lived in harmony with its massive wilderness were not alone. Their oral histories, their art, their spiritual beliefs, they're all saturated with accounts of powerful, non-human beings who shared the landscape. They didn't see these beings as monsters to be feared in the sense of a horror story. Rather, they were another nation, a powerful, older civilization of the wild. And these stories aren't just vague urban legends. They are specific, consistent, and shared across tribes separated by thousands and thousands of miles. The indigenous peoples didn't have a unified name for this entity because, well, their languages and cultures were diverse, but their descriptions were very unified. In the Pacific Northwest, among tribes like the Salish, it was often called Sasquatch, which translates roughly into wild man of the woods. Other tribes called it the Gogit, the wild woman of the forest, or Shayatanka, the big brother. In the eastern woodlands, the Iroquois spoke of the stone giants or stone coats. These were powerful, nearly invulnerable beings that were covered in rocks and bark. But the consistent thread running through all of these accounts is this. These beings were not merely large animals. They were considered the forest people or the brother nations. They were seen as having a complex intelligence, language, and a culture all of their own, and they were deeply tied to the land. More importantly, they were viewed as spiritual beings. Many tribes believed the forest people were messengers or watchers who enforced the spiritual laws of the forest. They were often described as possessing great psychic powers, right? They could read thoughts, they could create an intense feeling of dread, and even move through the world in a way that seemed supernatural or spiritual to the human eye. They were said to be keepers of an ancient wisdom that we, in our modern world, have entirely forgotten. But this connection didn't end with the arrival of European settlers and explorers. If anything, the stories simply evolved. For those pushing west, the wilderness was not a spiritual home, but a formidable challenge. A place of profound and often lethal mysteries. When we think of the historical titans of American exploration, names like Daniel Boone, Meriwether Lewis, and William Clark come to mind. These men were practical, battle-hardened, and intimately familiar with the forest and its known dangers. Their journals are testaments to observation, detailing thousands of new species of plants and animals, and yet there are gaps. There are omissions. There are moments where the practicality cracks and something else slips in. Now, both Daniel Boone and Lewis and Clark are documented to have recorded encounters with massive bipedal creatures that just simply couldn't be classified. They didn't know what to call them. Now, in the journals of Lewis and Clark, they write of the burning of the woods from up on a high ridge. Later, they learned that the local tribes ascribed this to a being that they called the monster, a giant creature that can travel as fast as a horse, that will never sleep, and that can kill a man without effort. Boone himself, it's said, once shot a large ape-like creature in the Kentucky wilderness, and this was an encounter that he would only speak of to his closest of confidants. And perhaps most compellingly, we look to the accounts of the 26th President of the United States, Theodore Roosevelt. Now, Roosevelt was not just a politician. He was an avid outdoorsman, a skilled naturalist, a passionate conservationist. And he knew the difference between a bear, a cougar, and an unknown beast. Yet, in his book, The Wilderness Hunter, he recounts a story told to him by an old practical mountain man named Bauman. Now, Bauman's story is, it's a bit of a harrowing tale of a multi-day torment by some kind of being that systematically stalked him and his partner in the Bitterroot Mountains. They describe this as a creature that walked upright on two legs, left massive footprints that defied animal anatomy, and had an odor that was sickeningly foul. It vandalized their camp, hounded them with eerie, echoing cries, and ultimately, this creature killed Bauman's partner. Now, Roosevelt was a man not prone to flights of fancy, so he retold this story in chilling detail, presenting it not as mere folklore, but as a sober account of a very real, very dangerous, unnamed creature deep in the forest. So when we look to history, it's not just a collection of ghost stories. It's a persistent testimony from those we consider the architects of the American West, and they're all describing the same specter. So what are they? When we say Bigfoot, what is it we are actually describing? Based on the thousands upon thousands of eyewitness reports, a remarkably consistent picture emerges. This is not an animal to be trifled with. Okay, we're talking about a bipedal primate standing anywhere from 7 to 10 feet tall, sometimes even taller. Its body is massive and powerfully built, with broad shoulders, a negligible neck, often described as the head sitting directly on the shoulders. Its entire body, with the possible exceptions of the palms of the hands and the soles of the feet, is covered in this thick, matted fur, ranging in color from dark brown to jet black, sometimes with glints of red or even white in the northern latitudes. The face is often described as ape-like, but with strikingly human-like eyes. And these eyes are often said to possess an eerie luminescence or a glow, particularly at night. Their strength is truly monolithic. Witnesses describe them effortlessly lifting immense boulders, snapping mature trees in half, and even throwing vehicles. Their agility is no less impressive. Despite their bulk, they can scale steep inclines and disappear into the thick brush with a speed and silence that seems impossible. Their behavior, while diverse, has consistent elements as well. They're nocturnal, or at least seem to be most active at twilight. They're highly vocal, utilizing vocalizations that range from deep guttural growls and screams that freeze the blood to complex language like chirps and whistles. There are accounts of them knocking rocks together or pounding on trees, commonly referred to as tree knocking. This is potentially a form of communication. And then there's the evidence. Now, while we lack a skeleton, the circumstantial evidence is overwhelming. We have the sheer volume of footprints, not just size, but consistent, observable dermal ridges that require an anatomical specificity. No hoax could master this. We've got audio recordings, such as the Sierra sounds or the Ohio howl and more. These are unique, complex, non-human, non-animal calls that have baffled linguists. We have hair and scat samples that can't be identified as any known animal, and in some cases, they even yield DNA that is bafflingly unique, suggesting an uncatalogued species or a primate relative we just haven't yet classified. Now, moving into the 20th century, from the famous Patterson-Gimlin film of 1967 to the thousands and thousands of modern-day encounters reported to organizations such as the Bigfoot Field Research Organization, this legend has not faded. It has only adapted. It's a presence that has not only survived in the age of the internet and the drone, but has continued to defy simple explanation. But yet, the forest is a vast wilderness, and its shadows hold more than just one of these mysteries. As we move from the relatively consistent archetype of the Bigfoot, the tone shifts drastically. We enter into a deeper, more profound darkness. Now, while the Bigfoot is described with a mix of wonder and ancient respect, there's another entity in the forest that is defined by something entirely different. It's an entity that is defined by pure terror. This is not a giant man, but something that bridges the gap between the wild beast and the unnatural. In recent decades, a name has begun to surface with increasing frequency, a name that sends a different kind of chill down the spine. We're speaking of the Dogman. While modern, the Dogman legend does have roots that stretch back through time and across oceans. Its physical form, a humanoid with the head of a wolf or a large hound, parallels ancient mythological figures. We look back as far as ancient Egypt in the figure of Anubis, who was the jackal-headed god of the underworld. While seen as a deity, not a forest creature, the powerful imagery of a human-like form with a canine head is deeply embedded in the human consciousness. In North America, the comparison to Native American counts of the werewolf and the shapeshifter cannot be ignored. Many tribes had stories of beings that could transform from human to wolf or possessed a kind of a hybrid form. And these entities were universally feared as powerful and unpredictable and often malevolent forces associated with black magic and spiritual corruption. There are scattered, whispered historical accounts that some say predate the modern term, Dogman. Tales of the beast that walked on two legs and howled like a man appear in fragmented diaries and tall tales of the early frontier. But in modern accounts, the consistency is truly terrifying. This is not the towering figure of Bigfoot. The Dogman is generally described as being a little bit smaller, yet still imposing, typically 7 to 8 feet in height. It's powerfully muscled like an apex predator and covered in shorter, darker fur. However, the differences are crucial. While Bigfoot is generally seen as a non-aggressive, protective watcher, the Dogman is uniformly reported as having an aggressive, dominant, and inherently terrifying nature. Witnesses describe it looking directly at them with these piercing, often reddish, glowing eyes, revealing a muzzle packed with long, powerful teeth and a grin of predatory intent. It's often stated that I could sense that thing could kill me if it wanted to, and there's nothing I could do about it. These creatures are reported to have long, dog-like legs, hands tipped with powerful claws, often described as looking like that of a raccoon, and they walk with an unsettling, unnatural gait and often move on all fours as easily as they do on two. And witnesses speak of a primal, paralyzing dread that accompanies its presence, a feeling of being viewed not as an encounter, but as prey. This is not a legend that has found its place in the world. It's an echo from a darker, more dangerous reality, one that is not content to simply watch us. So as we stand between two beings that defy classification, one is towering, ancient sentinel, rooted in spiritual lore and the deep history of the land, and the other is a predatory phantom, a manifestation of primal terror. But as we compare the two, we begin to see that simple biological explanations fall completely flat. They're just not sufficient. So the question has to be asked, are these creatures truly of our world, or are they something else entirely? Now, many in the field of cryptozoology and those studying the paranormal have suggested that we're not looking at a rare undiscovered animal, but we're looking at beings of a completely different nature. We're looking at interdimensional beings. That these entities exist primarily in a dimension that is tangent to ours, and that they can only cross into our world for reasons we can only speculate for brief periods of time. Now, this would explain the frustratingly fleeting nature of the sightings, the lack of skeletal remains, and their ability to seemingly vanish into thin air, even in open terrain. And there are dozens of accounts with both Bigfoot and Dogman of these beings simply stepping behind a tree and disappearing, or even of a sudden disorienting distortion in the air. Yeah, that's right. A portal through which these beings emerge and into which they retreat. So could these creatures be travelers, visitors from another reality? But this brings us to an even darker possibility. If these things are interacting with our world in ways we can't understand, is it possible that our own organizations are aware of this? And we could go darker still. Is it possible that our own organizations orchestrating this? Now, there's a powerful and persistent thread in both the Bigfoot and the Dogman communities concerning government involvement and cover-ups. There are many who believe that these creatures have been known to the authorities for decades, perhaps even centuries. They suggest that encounters are quickly and systematically silenced, that evidence is confiscated and classified, that people who have seen these entities are then followed and spied upon by men in black. But why? Well, the simple answer is to maintain a sense of order. The public acknowledgement of powerful, unpredictable, non-human intelligences coexisting in our world would completely destabilize our modern understanding of reality. But there is a far darker theory here. A theory that suggests these creatures are actually not ancient entities at all. Some believe that the Bigfoot and the Dogman are not naturally occurring entities, but are the products of covert government engineering. Now, this theory proposes that these are biological constructs, super soldiers, engineered for survival in extreme environments, or as a tool of a kind of geopolitical psychological warfare. Perhaps they're the perfect predator, built to move through the wilderness with an unnerving predatory intent, a presence that can be deployed to intimidate, disrupt, and neutralize. The Dogman's aggressive, predatory nature is cited by many as evidence to this kind of weaponization. But still, the question remains unanswered. Are these legends of the wild ancient watchers? Are they interdimensional visitors? Or are they the terrifying creations of our own technological hubris? Well, the truth, as they say, may be far more terrifying than the fiction. So as we step back from the edge of the deep forest, we're actually left with more questions than answers. The shadows of the wilderness remain long, and its secrets remain well guarded. Are the Bigfoot and the Dogman simple animals that have simply eluded our reach for thousands of years? Are they spiritual beings, sentinels of the land we've forgotten how to listen to? Or are they travelers from another dimension? Or are they horrifying creations of our own power? We can't say for sure. Oh, I'm sure somebody knows, but we can't say for sure. We can speculate. But whatever these creatures are, just remember, the next time that you are alone, deep in the dark forest, or as you're driving down a dark, lonely country road, or simply standing by the window in your home looking out into the darkness, remember, the wilderness isn't just a place that you go, but it's an original state. It's a force that hasn't forgotten us, even if we have forgotten it and the creatures that are within. And they're always watching.
Thank you for listening to this episode of The Lowdown. If you like what you heard, hit that subscribe button, share with your friends and family. Follow me on Instagram and subscribe on YouTube. Once again, if you've got an encounter that you'd like to share or if you'd like to be on the show, you can email me at thelowdownpodcast411@gmail.com. Thanks again for listening, and I will see you next time right here on The Lowdown.